Hey, folks, good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. First off, I just want to thank everyone for having me on here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on in this space with so many brilliant people. And obviously, another shout out to my good friend and definitely Cheryl Erica Vladimir, who she was a big part of like why I wrote that piece. When everything was happening with Cuomo with the accusations, one of the things I thought long and hard about was like, what could I be doing to better show up? And I love to write. That's my passion. I do organizing, activism, politics by day, but I'm an armchair liberal by night. And I wanted to figure out how I could put those armchair liberal powers to good use. So I share that story of an experience that happened to me my first year working at Citizen Action of New York. So I've been thinking about patriarchy, sexism, and harassment for a couple of years now. And one of the big things I've taken away from it more than anything is that on its face, most men don't even understand that what they're doing is wrong. And does it make it okay? No. Does it mean that we should forget about it and give men space? Absolutely not. But it does speak to the kind of society that we have, where we have made sure to front load these harmful ideas about masculinity, about leadership, about the ways you can engage with the opposite sex or the same sex, and about accountability. I know growing up, my dad used to always tell me, you do whatever you can to get what you want from a woman. That's what you do. You lie, you curse, you steal, you learn a new language. He learned Dutch so he can impress women. And in every space I went to that was male dominated, there was a culture of men being able to do whatever they wanted to do because that's what men are supposed to do. It wasn't just an idea anymore, it was an obligation. It was something I was supposed to live up to. And I think you're seeing a lot of that happen in Albany as well. But on top of all that bad socialization, we're also dealing with folks who some are far too drunk on power, some are there for all the bad reasons. Some of them are there because they can get away with it because they know not enough people will speak. Because as Erica mentioned and other people have mentioned, folks have to worry about keeping their jobs, paying their bills, making sure that they can take care of the loved ones. And you can't do that if your job is in danger. And far too often, the people with the power tend to be male and they tend to not have the best ideas about healthy workspaces. But how do we change that? That's the big question. So first off, we have this mandatory sexual harassment training that everyone in the state has to do, right? I've done it several times now, and I gotta tell you, it is boring. It is not very helpful. The only thing I look forward to in that training are the really, really poorly acted reenactments because they're always hilarious. But the basis of that training is not about how to be a better person. It is not about accountability. It is actually about, to be clear, how not to get sued and how not to get your company or organization sued. And now listen, no one wants to be sued. Me, I'm poor. I can barely afford to pay attention. So if you sue me, I'm in trouble. But that should not be the motivation for not wanting to commit sexual harassment or make uncomfortable workspaces for people. And I think the first thing we need to do is reframe the way we're having these conversations about harassment. It shouldn't be a thing you have to do once a year or once a quarter because you supervise people and your organization doesn't want to get in trouble with the state or they don't want to be liable for a lawsuit. It should be happening consistently. It should be baked into all the work that we do, all the conversations that we have until it is a part of the social fabric of wherever you are. That's one. Two, when we're talking about harassment, workplace harassment, harassment of anyone, particularly in Albany, I think it's very important that we have to make sure that we're having a conversation about the impact. I'm going to speak for myself, but I think I speak for a lot of men when I say for a long time, I did not understand the impact of my behavior because I was not taught to understand the humanity of women. And it wasn't that I didn't grow up with women, brilliant, amazing, kind, wonderful women in my life. But for some reason, I had done the mental gymnastic where I separated the women that I knew into one side and the women that I didn't know into another side. So I can humanize my mother or my sister or my friend, but I couldn't humanize the woman down the street. And I think a lot of men have that problem. They just cannot see the humanity in women. And because of that, and because of the ideas that we are told about masculinity and the way we're supposed to show up, we're doing things and we're not even thinking about who it's going to hurt, how it makes them feel, how it makes the space unhealthy. And then when we're not talking about directly engaging with women and we're talking about leadership, we've also got all of the wrong lessons. We've been told that leadership looks like one thing, a charismatic person making all the decisions. They are the all powerful person. It is a competition, it is a challenge, and the best way to get things done is to dominate. And when we've seen different examples of leadership styles and it doesn't fit within that framework, it's criticized. So I'll use an example of a leadership style that I actually appreciate. So Andrea Stewart Cousins, the majority leader of the New York State Senate, has a reputation of being somebody who listens to her conference. But what does that actually mean? Well, it means that before she decides what direction the conference is going to go when it pertains to legislation or their position on an issue, she listens to the conference. She has conversations with people. She has one-on-ones. She makes committees so people can talk things through and hash it out. And then she gets a recommendation and considers it with whatever she's thinking, and they make a decision as a team. That kind of leadership style, in my opinion, is the best one because it gives you the opportunity to make a decision that's very informed. It gives your team the opportunity to be heard and give feedback and feel like they're a part of the process. So no matter what direction you go in, everybody feels heard and seen and feels clear. That's not very masculine. If you ask most people what a great idea of leadership is, and if a male did that or a man did that, they would be seen as weak or as someone who could be taken advantage of. And instead, what you get are these people who think they have to come into a space and rule it with an iron fist. So as we're talking about re-socializing men so that we can understand the harm that we are causing, so that we can understand and see the humanity in women, and that we can make sure we're not actually causing harm consistently in professional, personal, or just casual spaces, we also have to make sure we're having a new conversation about what leadership looks like. Leadership does not look like you forcing someone's hand, then taking the credit. Leadership does not look like you ignoring a problem for as long as you can, and then when you decide it benefits you, doing something about it, but only doing it in a way that only helps you. Leadership does not look like going to a group of people and telling them what to do and then yelling at them or micromanaging them. But those are all things we've been told is leadership. Leadership looks like service. It looks like listening. It looks like collaboration. It looks like process, systems, and teamwork. And we got to move away from this idea that that framework right there is inherently feminine. And if it is inherently feminine, we have to shift this idea that femininity is a bad thing because it is absolutely not. And once we start attacking those pieces and those components, I think we'll be right along our way in helping to decolonize the minds of men like myself and others so that you won't see so many examples of harassment. But while that's happening, we have to make sure that when there are people who will not engage, when there are bad actors, and we've got a couple of bad actors, there has to be a very clear line so that they're held accountable. Now, I think that men cause the problem of sexism and patriarchy and harassment. So I think it's our job to fix it. We broke it, we fixed it. It's not women's jobs. Women have had to live with it and they have excelled despite it, right? So we messed it up, we got to take care of it. Having said all that, we have to make sure we are listening to the people who have been directly impacted by harassment, patriarchy, sexism, male privilege. And it's not men. It's not Stanley, who has always been given a front row seat to speak because I just happen to be tall, I have a deep voice, and I like the sound of my voice at the same time. So we had to make sure we're creating space to listen to these women and find out what's going on. And then when there are bad actors, you need to make them uncomfortable. And I'm talking to the men here now, actually. When you are in a meeting and someone gets out of line and raises their voice at a colleague, a female colleague, and you know they wouldn't do that if it was a male colleague, you need to make them uncomfortable. I'm not saying you need to fight them or yell at them, but you have to call it out. Because as a man, you do have the privilege in that space. You have to say, this is wrong. You cannot do this. That isn't appropriate. It also means that when there are bad actors, no matter what role they have, no matter what they've done, no matter who they are to us, we have to hold them accountable. Period. And accountability does not mean cancel. You can't cancel anybody. If they're canceled, they're dead. And guess what? People are continuously evolving and changing forever, or at least until they die. So as long as they're alive, there is an opportunity to keep on moving. And we should be working with people. I got to tell you, the Stanley Fritz from 2012 is much different from the Stanley Fritz in 2021. And the Stanley Fritz in 2012, if I could read some of the things that Stanley said or thought, I'd be really embarrassed. And you guys would probably be really mad at me. But I had the space to learn and to grow. And I had a lot of overworked and overstressed women who did the work to educate me. It's like I got to a point when I realized, oh, wow, this is not good. And now every day, my simple goal is to just be less trash. And what do we mean by this concept of trashness? It doesn't mean that you're a horrible person. It doesn't mean that you are evil. It doesn't mean that you need to be destroyed. But it does mean that as a man, I can show up in ways that is just not good. And because I love slang in Brooklyn, we say trash when something is not good. I want to be less trash. I'll have moments where I'll slip up, and I want to be accountable to that. And I want to have space where people can forgive me, but every day I am aspiring to be a little bit better, because we're not going to dismantle all these systems that cause these problems right away, but we can decolonize our minds and others. So thank you, folks.